Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast, powered by Olipop, our main sponsor of the OU Insider live and podcast. And anything that we do right now at OU Insider is Olipop driven. If you're not an Olipop fan, you need to go to your local, Sprouts, or your local grocery store probably has it. Your local, trying to think of all the natural groceries. Help me out here, Parker.
Sprouts, Whole Foods,
Target,
and Walmart. That's where you can find it in the state of Oklahoma, for sure.
Yep.
I mean, it's all across the country at this point in big box retailers and supermarkets, so you can find it just about anywhere. It is blowing up, taking the soda industry by storm. They're sold out as far as their online inventory pretty much every week. I was very fortunate to get enough ordered to be able to supply everybody with an Olipop at my wedding next weekend. But it flies off the shelves and will continue to, because, folks, it's soda without any of the soda guilt. Never more than 5 grams of natural sugars, sweetened with natural sweeteners, 9 grams of fiber in every can. And it comes in 14 familiar, delicious flavors. Olipop's got a flavor for you. And once you try it, you won't go back to your traditional sodas. DrinkOlipop.com is where you can go for more information. You can use promo code CHAMPU20 to get 20% off your first order.
There you go. On this episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast, brought to you by Olipop, we're going to talk about two commits in 2025. We're going to talk about David Stone. We're going to talk about Williams Nwaneri. We're going to talk about Sooners Under the Stars. How did that event go for Oklahoma? We're going to talk about Party in the Palace, and we're going to dive a little bit into OU Media Day, but we're going to wait and really get into the crux of that for the following podcast that will come on Monday. So if you are a follower, please subscribe right now to OUinsider.com. It's free until September 2nd. Free until September 2nd. If you sign up right now using the promo code PATP23, which is Party at the Palace 23, PATP 23. And we need you to like, subscribe this podcast right here. Give it 5 stars on any platform that you listen to, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, whatever you listening to. Go, please. iHeartRadio. If you listen to it on those platforms, give us 5 stars, give us a good rating. We want to thank you guys for always having us in the top 200 on iTunes. And please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're already over 10,000 because of you guys. Pretty awesome. That was in 18 months. 10,000. Pretty freaking cool. All right. Let's start with Elijah Thomas.
Let's do it.
He was the second commit out of the two. Mr. OK Preps, Mr. Chakotah. Between him and Carrie Underwood, those are 2 celebrities out of Chakotah that everybody will remember.
By the way, Brandon, just so you're aware, I was corrected today while on the radio by numerous Okies, born and bred Okies, who informed me that it is not Chakotah, but Shakotah. So,
Chakotah.
Yes, Chakotah. Kind of like, if you're not from Oklahoma, you would never guess that Chickasha is pronounced the way that it is.
Yeah, well.
Thankfully, I heard someone say Chickasha before I ever had to say Chickasha and sound like an idiot by saying Chickasha or something like that. But I was very quickly corrected when I said Chakotah, because Chakotah is apparently the regionalized pronunciation. But yeah, Carrie Underwood, Elijah Thomas, the 2 hottest tickets in Chakotah, Oklahoma.
Chakotah. Yeah, well, you got to hear my wife try to say some of the names of Oklahoma towns. It is butchered upon butchered upon butchered. Like, she can't do it. Like most people, like her family, they're like, "What is that town called? Tecumseh?" I'm like, "No, it's Tecumseh." So, anyways, yeah, no, that's a huge get. I don't think people, unless they really follow recruiting, understand how talented Elijah Thomas is.
That kid is
that
good.
Is a freak. I was talking to sports today, and it is a battle right now between the defensive side and the offensive side for him. Obviously, offensive side's winning. He's committed to play wide receiver at Oklahoma. But if you talk to Elijah Thomas, yeah, he probably prefers wide receiver a little more, but he doesn't care. He said, he's like, dude, I don't care. I'll play wherever they want to play me. If it's safety, that's where I'll play. If it's wide receiver, that's where I'll play. He kind of reminds me a little bit of, I don't want to say JoJo Earl, which is a really good comparison, by the way, but I'm trying to think of, help me here, wide receivers at Alabama back in the day.
How far
Not
back
not
in the day are we
not
going?
Devontae Smith. That crew, the trio, the quartet that was
Jalen
so good.
Waddle?
No, not Waddle. Waddle is a freak. Jalen Waddle will be more like Isaiah Mosey.
Yeah. Yeah. Who would you be thinking of? Alabama.
I think
Receivers.
Denver's
Oh,
wide
Jerry
receiver.
Judy.
Jerry Judy. That's who it reminds me of, is Jerry Judy. There you go. Thank you. A lot of Jerry Judy, just super explosive, can play out in space. He's not thin, but he's not thick. Like
Exactly.
he's got a really good body frame on him that it will be able to add some good weight
How
and be
about
a
this one?
really strong.
Let me throw
You're
one
going to
at
say
you. How
CeeDee
about,
Lamb, aren't you?
well, I wasn't going to say CeeDee Lamb. How about another guy from within state lines within the last few years that had offers to play on both sides of the ball? Gentry Williams.
He's thicker than Gentry.
He
Gentry
is
was
thicker than Gentry. Gentry,
and
I think, was
Gentry
like
Gentry could
168
run
starting
like
college.
nobody's business though. So, but I get where you're going from, just from an aspect of just
A
being
guy with the,
super talented on both
yeah,
sides
just
of the ball.
a guy with the capacity to play at a very high level on either
Yeah.
side of the ball.
That's why a lot of people compared Jacoby Johnson to CeeDee Lamb, because their their frames were just big. Obviously, Jacoby's bigger than CD, but not by much. CD's a big dude. So I love the pick. I think that he's going to be just a natural playmaker for Oklahoma, just a guy that he's going to be able to stretch the field, number one, but he's also a really good possession guy that if you get him out in space, whether it's a dig route, whether it's a mesh route or something like that, he's going to be able to create. And I think that is probably the biggest thing when you talk about Elijah Thomas, is his ability to create something out of nothing. He's so good at that. And so people always ask, do you think he could be a 5-star when it's all said and done? Look, he's a 5-star talent. There's no denying that. But he's from Shakota. And a lot of people aren't going to think that his competition is worthy enough for him to be put at 5-star.
His last name is not Manning.
Correct. That's a really good analogy. Really good analogy. So what's your thoughts on that, Parker?
I love Elijah Thomas, and this is people who listen to the podcast or listen to me on the radio, they understand this. Like, Elijah Thomas is one of my favorite cats in the whole 2025 class because I think the ceiling is so high. And I'm always intrigued by those small town kids, because what can end up happening is one of two things. Either they get to the collegiate level and they just hit a brick wall because of the jump in the level of competition, or they get to the collegiate level and they have infinitely more resources, better training, just the things that are available to them in order to improve their craft and help them refine their physique and their weight room numbers and all that. Like, there's so much more they have to work with in the collegiate environment than they do in a place like Shakota, Oklahoma. And so that's why I think it's really boom or bust with kids like that. Elijah Thomas to me screams boom. And I would say, kind of one of my favorite kids in the class of 2024 that's kind of that same ilk is Grant Bricks, right? Small town kid who is just country strong, and all he knows is to throw people, punish them. And so it's kids like that I think you're taking. It maybe is a little bit more of a risk than is typical for their peers when you look at the rankings and figure, okay, like he's ranked in a similar region as guys that play high level football in Texas and California and Florida. It's maybe a little bit more of a gamble, but I'm very much of the opinion that you can look at the tape and tell what's real and what's not. And you flip on Elijah Thomas's tape, it is evident that the skills he has are going to translate to the collegiate gridiron. And we saw it at camp. We saw it at camp in early June. Elijah Thomas had no problem going up against whoever he lined up against at OU's camp, whether that was a blue chip defensive back and Tristan Haynes. I'm trying to think who else was there that day that he lined up against, but was one of the most dominant performers on that particular day. Already had the OU offer. That just really solidified that, okay, this is somebody that Oklahoma ought to and will prioritize. And less than 2 months later, here we are, and he's committed to the University of Oklahoma. So love Elijah Thomas. I think the ceiling is incredibly high for him. I would like to see him at wide receiver, to be honest with you, but whichever side of the ball he ends up on, kind of like Billy Bowman, you just get the sense that he's going to do special things.
Right. No, yeah, you do. He's got a chance to, and like you said at the camp, I think that was kind of the epiphany for a lot of people that may not have seen him live before, when he was just demolishing everybody that tried to cover him. It was not fair. And it got to the point where when he would run routes for Kevin Sperry, it was almost seamless, like they had a instinctual bond already with them, in between them, as far as just timing and all that type of stuff, because that's hard to do in those camps, because you're just rotating through all this and then all these different players over and over and over, and then all of a sudden you see Oklahoma's 2025 quarterback go up there with the potential target, now commit, and it was like they could do no wrong. It was like pitch and catch, and that's got to be a good sign if you're Jeff Levy and company. You got to look at that and go, okay, starting early. Like it. And to Thomas's credit, when I asked him, I said, are you going to be committing, and who do you want to go after in 2025? Whenever he called to tell me about the commitment. And he said, look, man, whoever they want me to go after, he goes, but I'll say this. He goes, I'm going to get a hold of Kevin every day, and we're going to work on somebody every day. That's the plan. Like, we are going to make sure we're on top of one of the targets every day. And he goes, we'll just go through the list. He goes, because I want this to be the number one class in the country. And you hear the same with, obviously, 2025 defensive line commit Kamari Moore. He said some pretty brash and bold things since committing.
Yeah,
Parker,
man.
you're the one. You're the one that interviewed him. Kind of break that down for us.
Well, he said we're going to have the number one class in 2025 for sure. And, you know, I was talking to somebody that was present for the Sooners Under the Stars event on Tuesday, or was it Wednesday? I don't recall, but they said the exact same thing. But they said it came from Brent Venables' mouth. They said Brent Venables got up in front of all the recruits that were present and said, we expect to have the number one class in 2025. And I know it's very early, Brandon, probably too early to confidently project that, but from the direction that this class is already headed in terms of who's committed, who they're going to be in play for, and who they have the opportunity to get over the next year and a half, it's pretty clear that Oklahoma is going to be in that conversation, if nothing else, because Kevin Sperry's stock is going to soar. Elijah Thomas is already a top 100 player. He's going to move up as opposed to moving down. If he moves anywhere, it'll be up. Same thing with Grayson Harris, man. I think Grayson Harris hasn't played his best football at the high school level yet. Kamari Moore isn't even ranked as of right now, but he will be. He will be. That's a blue chip talent in my mind, no question. And think about Isaiah Mosey, if and when he jumps on board, Gus Cordova, Christian Thatcher, another top 100 player that Oklahoma is what I'll put it this way with Christian Thatcher. That one's as close to officially done as you could imagine. So Sooners are in very good shape with the blue chip linebacker from Arborview High School out in Las Vegas. And then you think about guys like Michael Fasusi, who for my money is a 5-star, Ty Haywood, Marcus James, Jaden Nickens. I mean, Oklahoma, like, consider this. Oklahoma's already run into this problem in the 2024 class. They're going to run into it all the more so in the class of 2025. They're going to have to turn some pretty talented kids away that want to come play at the university. Like, and in the 24 class, they took 5 wide receivers, and trust me, if Emmett Jones wanted to, he could take 7 or 8. I promise you, he could take 7 or 8, because those 5, they got in on the ground floor, and there are still a few, and a couple really talented prospects at the wide receiver position that are still hitting up Emmett to see if maybe, just maybe, there's going to open up an opportunity, whether now or down the line, for them to jump on board with the Sooners. So in 2025, and I think this is pretty immediately becoming a problem, if you truly want to call it that, at wide receiver, but it could multiply across other position groups. Like if Isaiah Mosey commits, at that point, man, Andrew Marsh is still out there. Jaden Nickens is still out there. Emmanuel Choice is still out there. Not all of those guys can end up at Oklahoma.
Correct.
So in that 25 class, man, it's almost a question of, okay, who is there not going to be room for more so than anything else right now?
Yeah. So you brought up a really good point about them having to push some guys away, particularly at wide receiver. And to me, and this is just me spitballing here, it feels like Oklahoma has just kind of a whatever they want, they can do. They don't just they can literally put their hand in a jar and pull out whoever they want to pull out, and they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
At that position. And we obviously think Isaiah Mosey is going to be the next guy to pop at wide receiver. I don't think we've hidden the fact that we believe that. But you've got still, like, you named off several guys. Andrew Marsh, Tanuk Hines obviously is another player. And we didn't even talk about Jaden Nickens very much. I mean, that guy, he could play safety too, but I don't know that Oklahoma sees him as a safety. I don't know that he has that particular mindset right now. You have Marcus Harris, right, out of Mater Dei. Who else did you say? You said Chase. Oh my gosh, who did you say? Who else did you say?
The other 3 that I mentioned were Nickens, Andrew Marsh, and Emmanuel Choice.
And then Jacaden Ferguson. Like, Oklahoma's in a fantastic position with him. And so you look at all that and you're like, man, how do you tell all these guys no after you pick up 2 more? Because they're going to take 4. They would be stupid with how good the players are in 2024. That wide receiver core in 24 might be one of the deepest I've ever seen. Would you agree with that? Like, it's super, super deep in that class.
It is very deep. And again, you got your pick of the litter almost, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And by the way, how can you not love Emmett Jones right now? If you're an Oklahoma fan, is there somebody that you revere more for their acumen on the recruiting trail at this particular moment in time more than Emmett Jones? Because all he has done in the 6 months that he's been on Oklahoma's staff is absolutely clean house. And yeah, you can say Bryant Wesco went to Clemson or whatever, which is true. And would Bryant Wesco be more than welcome at Oklahoma and an enormous addition to the class? Yes, absolutely. But the Sooners got 5 wide receiver commits,
right,
including a guy in Zion Kearney that some believe is just as good as, if not better than, Wesco. He's already about done in the class of 2025, Emmett Jones is. Once he gets Isaiah Mosey, shoot, that guy can take a whole year off of recruiting if he wants to, and he's not going to do that, but he could. So, man,
Yeah.
like it truly is remarkable that the guy hit the ground running and has been able to make as much of a tangible impact for the program on the recruiting trail as he has in just 6 months.
Mm-hmm. It's wild, man. Like he could literally go and get Isaiah Mosey and then call 3 or 4 guys and be like, okay, first come, first serve. I only have 1 spot left. Who's it going to be? And just see who bites and just take them and be done with it and just be done with it. But it doesn't even end there in 25, though. I think you look at the offensive line and what Bill Bedenbaugh has already started to, not so much accrue, but at least build relationship wise. And you brought him up, Michael Fasusi. I believe Oklahoma's in such a strong spot there. And yeah, he's taken some other visits outside of Oklahoma recently. But if you ask him where he's been more than any place else, it's been Oklahoma. He's been to OU more than anywhere. I think you can look at Lamont Rogers and the same thing is taking place. He unfortunately didn't get to come to Sooners Under the Stars. His sister was in the hospital. Supposedly everything's worked out okay. And that stuff is working in, Oklahoma's favor right now. Like, source I was talked to, a source that I spoke with around Lamont Rogers, literally said Oklahoma has separated themselves away from everybody else and they've set the standard for everybody else. If that truly is the case, and you land Lamont Rogers and you land Michael Fasusi and you land, let's say they land Ty Haywood and Owen Hollenbeck, and those are your 4 for the in 2025. Yeah, between the offensive line, quarterback, and then the wide receiver core, you're already setting yourself up for the number 1 class in the country with those. And that's not even counting, Parker, OK Preps. Alex Shieldknight, CJ Nixon, Jaden Nickens. Trying to think of everybody that obviously Oklahoma already has Kevin
all
Sperry.
The Carl Albert cats.
All the Carl Albert guys. Whether it's Tristan Haynes, the 4-star defensive back / wide receiver, whether it's the 3-star wide receiver, Trine Washington, you obviously have Kevin Sperry already on board. And now you set yourself apart from everybody else. Outside of Kevin Sperry, the other top guy is Marcus James, a guy that has a chance to be a high-level 4 or 5-star guy when it's all said and done. You don't have to leave the state. You close in on, if you take all 8 of those guys, right, you already have 3 others. That's 11 commits right there. Now you go down to Dallas and grab the offensive line guys, right? There's 4. Now you're at 15. You really, now you have a chance to just kind of go up 2 hours to Derby, Kansas, which is south of Wichita or southeast of Wichita, I believe. And Deshaun Brame, who might be the number 1 tight end in the country.
That cat is that dude can play ball.
Yeah, and Oklahoma's in a good spot. And they're in a good spot with that kid. You got Gus Cordova that Oklahoma's in a really good spot with out of Lake Travis. So now you're at 15, right? Like, maybe you get Riley Wormley out of South Lake Carroll. Now you're at 16, 4-star running back, one of the top running backs in the country. You get, trying to think, from Christian Thatcher, right? Out of Las Vegas, linebacker.
Arborview High School. Yep.
Right. Okay. Now you're at 17, right? Like, if you land all the OK Preps guys, you don't have to go in land, but and let's just say they call it the state of Oklahoma. When you and I both know this. When they talk about the state of Oklahoma and these coaches say it, the state of Oklahoma, they don't just mean Oklahoma. They mean from Nebraska all the way down to Austin. That's the state of Oklahoma, or Waco, kind of, and back up. That's where it's all encompassing in that area. And that's what they call the state of Oklahoma. They don't call those guys out of staters. If you're within an 8-hour, 7-hour drive, you're an in-state kid in their mind. And it's easy for parents to get to and fro. It's a day drive back and forth. It's a weekend deal for the games. So Oklahoma has a really good chance to pack a big punch, because we didn't even talk about Jaden Woods, bro. Jaden Woods, yeah, I know Landon Rink is a Texas legacy, but Oklahoma, he's been to Oklahoma twice now, 3 times, I think, recently. And Oklahoma's really positioned themselves in a good spot. Zay Gentry out of McKinney, 4-star defensive back. Where I said Jaden Woods earlier, the 4-star defensive end out of Shawnee Mills, Kansas, and Mill Valley High School. Parker, I mean, like it's when BV gets up there and he says this could be the number 1 class in the country, he means it. Now all they got to do is go grab a couple of guys from maybe North Carolina, Florida, California, accumulate that with the guys from Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, and they're done. Because it's that deep in that region. The local region is so deep, they barely have to leave Norman to do much recruiting. It's kind of wild. And it's been a long time since that's been the case. Because look, I was talking to somebody today and they were like, the 2024 class is just really weird. Because you got half your D-line class at IMG, right? Like,
Sure.
The other half is either in Kansas City, which isn't a far drive. That's considered in state. And I'm air quoting if you're watching this. But you got a tight end from California, got an O lineman from California. Like, it's not your normal Oklahoma class where probably a third of it's from Oklahoma or Texas, and then they just start nitpicking everybody else from across the regions, or in Kansas. Let's say Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas. That's normally where they kind of lay their tracks, right? And it's sort of like that, but there's a lot of random, like IMG. I mean, they're going to go, Iowa is another place they might go to, obviously. Like, that's random, right? They don't normally recruit the state of Iowa. And that was that person's point, was it's just a lot of just nitpicking here or there, where normally they kind of stay within their little region and then branch out and grab guys here or there to accumulate with local guys. It's just a different class, but they're still doing really well regardless of that.
Yeah. Now I think the perfect, you can illustrate that point with 2 particular case studies in the 2025 class. And that would be Lee's Summit North, right? Oklahoma's got Kamari Moore from there. Probably going to get Isaiah Mosey from there. And then when you look at tight end, Joe John Finley's wheelhouse, and I know he's a Texas guy, but where he's got a lot of familiarity, especially because of some family connections that he has, is the Midwest, Nebraska and Kansas. So he offered Desan Brame, he offered Chase Lofton. Those are the 2 guys that Oklahoma's going for in the 25 class at tight end. Now, those aren't the only guys that Finley's going to touch base with, obviously. He'll actively recruit several others, but those are the 2 that Oklahoma's really pressing for at this point. And so as this staff kind of turns the page from 24 to 25, and I get we're nowhere close to done with 24, but when you tie a bow on that 24 class, heading into year 3 as a staff, cycle number 4, or perhaps more accurately 3.5 as a staff, what you can really start to do at that point is, with some of the relationships you've established in particular, you can kind of sit in your wheelhouse and just let things roll. And that's what this Sooner staff is going to. And Jaden Woods is another great example, right? Miguel Chavis is on the verge of owning Kansas City if he can lock down Williams Nwaneri. So Jaden Woods, it makes all the sense in the world for Oklahoma to make Jaden Woods a top priority at the edge in 25.
How much do you think Kansas, Kansas State, Missouri, Nebraska absolutely hate Miguel Chavis right now if he pulls off Williams Nwaneri, PJ Adebawore, and Jaden Woods in 3 straight classes? There has got to be just some vitriol of all vitriol being thrown in Miguel Chavis's way from those staffs.
Man. The Sooner, like, what, any way you slice it, whether they close out Nwaneri or not, we'll get to that in more detail later. But whether they close out Nwaneri or not, Oklahoma has already very firmly established themselves as perhaps the main player at the P5 level in the Kansas City area. Because at this point, that staff can walk up there and have a shot at just about anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you think about Kansas State staff, my gosh. And they're like, dude, we just won the Big 12. What the hell? Like, why are we not getting our flowers from these in-state? Why do they want to go?
Yeah, I'm sure the Kansas State staff is like, we just want Michael Boganowski. Just let us have Michael Boganowski.
Yeah, and speaking of, I guess you brought him up. He is at OU's party in the Palace today as we sit here and record. And they've already visited Kansas and they visited Kansas State. The cool thing about the difference between Oklahoma and those two is the fact that they're staying the night and hanging out and eating breakfast with the staff in the morning. So you take that for what that just seems like that's a big positive in my opinion. Because that's just extra time for you to sit around, talk, get to know each other a little bit more, a little better, and not really feel like anything is being forced. Now, I think there's probably going to be some tough conversations had at that breakfast, would be my guess. But those conversations need to be had at this juncture. Like how many times it's dead period after July 31st. So when he gets back, he's done with the visits. He sits down, he talks with his family. How many more, does he really need to drag it out into the season? He's been to Oklahoma, but it'll be 6 times now. And he's been to Kansas State. He lives down the road to Kansas State, 15 minutes. And he lives 2 hours or an hour and a half from Lawrence. So what more does he need seen? It's like Eli Bowen not showing up to Party in the Palace today, which he didn't, because he's golfing with his brothers, his brother and his dad. But on the flip side, we're also being told he's going to announce between now and September 2nd. So you're starting to see things dwindle down. Like, what more does he need to see? And do you believe that Eli Bowen's going to be showing up to Peyton's games every Saturday, not committed to Oklahoma and committed to their arch rival? I don't see it. Do you see it, Parker?
No, miss me with that.
Okay.
I got Eli Bowen to Oklahoma.
No, me too.
I'll have to see it to believe it if he commits anywhere else.
Facts. So now let's dive into Boganowski here. And
okay, first off, like before you get any deeper on Boganowski, again, I just want to reiterate, like the Kansas State staff has to be absolutely fuming that this has even taken as long as it has. Because what are the odds? What are the odds you end up with the nation, or not the nation, but the state's #1 prospect 15 minutes down the road in a little town called Junction City, and that kid happens to be the son of a guy that your linebackers coach recruited to New Mexico State almost 30 years ago, And because of the position that his kid plays, his kid's primary recruiter is going to be that same assistant coach that recruited him.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, all of the optics there suggest that should be the biggest layup in the world for Kansas State. And yet here we are, and it's a dogfight between the Wildcats and Oklahoma for Michael Boganowski's commitment.
You know, it'd be funny is if he just ends up going to Kansas just to say screw both of them. Rock Chalk, baby. Hey man, they got David McCombs yesterday. It's good for them. They're cleaning house a little bit in Oklahoma. Guys, Oklahoma's not recruiting, but
I mean, it was a
good
great
get.
strategy on Kansas's part, right? You realize, okay, Oklahoma's already got their guy. They're not going to go after David McComb. Things are wide open. Kind of like with Red Martell, right? Like, hey, let's just go get the guy that's in state that can play, but because of the circumstances is never going to get the Oklahoma offer. And we'll just make sure we're on him the hardest and the longest, and we'll lock down his commitment.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful play. I mean, I could see them going and trying to do the same thing with Ryan Grayson, because I'm not sure Oklahoma's going to push that hard for Ryan Grayson, the cornerback out of Bags, which he's a good player, great athlete, comes from a high genetic family, obviously, of Division I athletes. So it's a really smart play by them to stay and land some of the hierarchy guys that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State aren't really going to push for, and then develop them into stars. But with Boganowski, I mean, you made a really good point. Like, and that's where I was kind of headed there, was if it was Kansas State, why not just already had it done? With everything that's working in their favor, why not already have had it done? And people will say, well, okay, well, the same thing goes for David Stone and Williams Winter. Okay, both those dudes live or are living 4 hours away and 20 hours away right now. So it's not like you can just go up to the university. They can't just hop in their car and go to the university. And guess what? When David Stone is back home, when he can hop in a car and go to the University of Oklahoma, he's at the University of Oklahoma almost every other day. So they're not comparable. It's almost like Boganowski's trying to find a reason not to go to K-State. It feels that way a little bit. But at the same time, he still feels very drawn to that university, because everybody in Junction City, in that surrounding area, is like, stay home, stay home, stay home. Your dad played for that coach. You need to go play for that coach. I think the one thing K-State did that might have screwed things up is they were recruiting him as a linebacker until they saw that Oklahoma was recruiting him as a safety, and they were the only school doing it, and it was working, and Oklahoma was out in front. And they went ahead and went, you can play wherever you want when you come here. But you know, the reality is when he gets on campus, if he signs with K-State, yeah, you're over there with the linebackers. That's what they do. That's what coaches do. I've seen it done at Oklahoma. Tell a kid he's going to do something else and play a different position, the position everybody thought he was going to play whenever he showed up to campus. So, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Parker? Because I kind of still feel Oklahoma getting the last swing here and then getting it for literally a day, 2 days almost, because they're staying the night, really favors Oklahoma unless they go back to K-State on Monday.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the ever-present threat, right? When you're that close to Kansas State, you can visit pretty much any time. And Boganowski has been to Kansas State a lot.
Yep.
Over the course of his recruitment.
K-State
was his first offer. We've talked about the depth of the relationship. Like, I get that it's Kansas State that you're dealing with here, but let's call it like it is. If Oklahoma swings Boganowski, that's an impressive win on the recruiting trail for Brandon Hall.
Mm-hmm.
That is not your average win over Kansas State. Not by a long shot. And it's kind of the same thing with Grant Bricks. You look at it from a casual observer's perspective, and you're like, okay, well, Oklahoma outfoxed Kansas State. Big whoop. But again, like when you understand just how deep the ties run for both of those kids,
Yeah, no,
I think you become cognizant when you become cognizant of that, you understand that, man, the Oklahoma staff has done a phenomenal job of putting themselves in position to close this thing out. And if they can close it out, you got to give them their flowers, because it was not an easy battle to win.
no, that's facts. Like, and Brandon Hall has proven that he can do those things. Like what he did with Peyton Bowen. I mean, just think of the mental fortitude it had to take to be Brandon Hall recruiting Peyton Bowen, and in the way that whole thing played out. And he just stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed on him until it eventually just worked in his favor. Because that's where Bowen's heart was the whole time. He knew it. Bowen knew it. He just had some other things pulling him in different directions. Other people, other things pulling him in different directions. And B Hall never wavered. And I think you see a little bit of that here in this Boganowski too. Like he's just not wavering. Like he's just going to keep chipping away, keep chipping away, keep chipping away. And you and I both think it's going to end up working in his favor again. Just persistence. I'm not as confident as I was with the Peyton Bowen stuff, but I still think it's going to end up in Oklahoma's favor, don't you?
I do. I
Yeah.
I give OU the edge because I think even though those relationships run so deep at K-State, I have gotten the sense that the family's preference in general is Oklahoma. And I think, Boganowski kind of understands that you want to play big boy ball. Oklahoma and the SEC is the place to be. And, that opens up a whole new can of worms about the direction of the Big 12. And Brett Yormark has done an outstanding job of re-establishing the public image of that conference and not making them feel like an afterthought in this new era of college football. They'll probably end up getting Oregon. Who knows? They could expand beyond that. But the Big 12 right now is not on nearly as shaky a footing as it was 2 years ago at this time. Even so, it's clear that the best football to be played in the country is played in the SEC. And with Oklahoma, and from the Oklahoma perspective, Brandon, that's what you can sell. You can say, hey, you know what? You want to play in the SEC and you want to play safety at the highest level, and you want to be part of a defense where it's not all on your shoulders to make plays, but your game is going to be complemented by elite blue chip talent at all three levels. You're going to have pass rushers up front that can get after the quarterback and make sure you only have to hold your assignment for 3 seconds instead of 6. And you're going to have linebackers that aren't going to miss tackles and leave you with a one-on-one opportunity to stop a guy in the open field. And if you come up short, he's waltzing into the end zone. If you want to be part of a flourishing defensive scheme that's going to prepare you for NFL football one day, there's no place better for you than Oklahoma. That's going to be the pitch that the Sooners have to make down the stretch with Michael Boganowski. And, it's going to be a tough thing for him to say no to Kansas State. Any way you slice it. If it is Oklahoma, that's going to be a real tough conversation to have with the Kansas State staff, in particularly Steve Stannard. But Oklahoma's put themselves in position to be the choice here. It's just a matter of being able to get over that final hump.
Speaking of humps,
whoa,
I don't know.
Where is this going?
Well, I was going to go through hump day here, but I know it's not hump day, but on hump day, you talked to, that was what I was segueing to.
I would never have guessed.
Because you interrupted me with the whoa.
When I heard speaking of humps, that is not where I thought that was headed. But anyway, what happened on hump day?
Quasimodo. Speaking of humps and hump day, there we go. That's what I was trying to get to. Where you're going, whoa, you spoke to some people around 5-star defensive end Williams Nwaneri's recruitment, and then you had an update. Oh, there's a lot of buzz going on, Parker. Like, he visited the other day, and now he's going to visit again. And that's why he didn't go. It's not because he was grounded. It's because of all this. There's so many rumors flying around. You have some people even egging it on in our industry, which they're like, I've heard there's rumors. Some people are saying he did. Some people are saying he didn't. I don't know because I haven't dug on it. And I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other he did or didn't. But I know you've dug on it. And so I'm going to put the ball in your court and let you stand on an island by yourself.
Oh, man.
No, I'm just kidding. No, he did. Go ahead.
Gosh. Let me ask you, Brandon, because you've been in the game longer than I have. In your experience, is it generally like this during the home stretch of a 5-stars recruitment? And when I ask that, what I mean is, like, you have people reporting right now that Georgia is still the leader for Nwaneri. Meanwhile,
who's reporting that still?
We won't name names, but
did it happen again today?
That's being reported. Now, you have Missouri predictions starting to fly in, and then you have people such as myself who maintain that Oklahoma still has the upper hand. So let's run down what has happened this week. He was supposed to visit Oklahoma on the 26th. That would have been Wednesday. He did not visit Oklahoma on Wednesday. Isaiah Mosey and Kamari Moore did, and of course, Kamari Moore ended up committing that evening. But Williams Nwaneri was not present. The reason Williams Nwaneri was not present was because, and
saying it out loud sounds really stupid, by the way.
Saying it out loud does sound really stupid. And it sounds like, well, that's the dumbest, lamest excuse you could have possibly come up with. But again, like, I am very deeply entrenched in the LSN community at this point, Lee Summit North, the school that Williams Nwaneri attends, for those unfamiliar. And look, what I can tell you is that what we reported on OU Insider is 100% true about why he didn't go to Oklahoma. And I am fully,
they're kids.
Like, I am fully aware, and I understand, and I am perfectly okay with the fact that that explanation will be laughed at and spat upon by some. Like, I can't make people believe that. But the reason he did not show up to Oklahoma was not because he was at Missouri that day. And I know that's also being reported certain places, that he visited Missouri that day instead of Oklahoma. I don't know how to address that other than to say, I've confirmed from every angle imaginable that he was not in Columbia that day. And if he was, it is an Ocean's 11 level conspiracy. But he was not at Missouri. I know there was a meeting between Nwaneri, his parents, and his head coach, Jamar Mosey, former Sooner running back, on Wednesday night to figure out whether or not he was still going to take the trip to Oregon. Now, this is where I think we need to remember the onus behind the Oregon visit in the first place. And that is that Williams Nwaneri initially intended to take an official visit to Oregon on September 23rd. That was before he and a lot of the people in his camp started to get really fed up with the recruiting process. And so there came a point at which those folks encouraged him to take the Oregon visit at the end of July to essentially give them one final shot and say he gave them a fair shake before he made his decision. There was a window at the end of July for him to take that Oregon visit instead of doing the OV in September. And so, goaded by the advice of those closest to him that have been heavily involved in the process, Nwaneri decided, okay, he's going to go to Oregon. Now, when that meeting happened on Wednesday night, here's what I have been told about it. Mom did not want him taking that Oregon visit. However, his head coach, Coach Mosey, again, former Oklahoma running back, member of the 2000 National Championship team, understand his background in all this. He was the one that said, look, this visit needs to happen, because the reason we scheduled this initially was because it was going to take the place of that official visit on September 23rd. Dan Lanning is a KC guy, has a ton of relationships with people down there, including Jamar and plenty of the Lee Summit Norfolk. Spent time on the Park Hill South staff, which is another prominent football program at the prep level in the Kansas City area. And so, if for no other reason than to do Lanning the courtesy of showing up and acknowledging his roots and his decency and devotion to recruiting the school in the area, Jamar Mosey and some of the other folks at LSN said, we need this. We need to take this visit. This visit needs to happen. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. He didn't go to Oklahoma for disciplinary reasons, whatever. But we need to take this trip to Oregon. And after that, no, figure it out as you so desire, was the message to Nwaneri and his family. So with that in mind, the Oregon visit, which is on tap for tomorrow as we sit here and record on a Friday night, July 29th, a Saturday, that visit is still on the schedule and will still proceed as planned. Missouri right now is pushing to get Nwaneri back on campus Monday, July 31st, which is the last day prior to the dead period. Now, I have been digging as recently as 2 hours ago on the situation there. And as we sit here recording this podcast, Nwaneri is not going to be in Columbia on Monday. Now, could that change between now and Monday? Certainly. And I will freely acknowledge that. There is a chance that things change there. But with the latest intel we have to go on, sitting here recording this podcast, Nwaneri is not expected in Columbia on Monday. The Missouri staff is working very hard to change that, because I think they understand that if they want to have a shot at this kid's commitment, they need to make the final impression, because the relationships are so strong at Oklahoma. He's got all those peer-to-peer relationships. He's got a coach that's an Oklahoma alumnus. And while, he's not necessarily a fan per se, he knows a lot of the staff at Oklahoma, and the staff at Oklahoma has been very intentional in recruiting his players. So with all of that as backdrop, it feels like Missouri really needs one last visit in order to tip the scales. But what I can say with some degree of certainty, having talked to a number of sources in Nwaneri's camp and on the periphery thereof, is that this is an OU Mizzou battle down the stretch here. And I reported this last week on OU Insider. Look, Georgia's not in the top two. Georgia's running third. And I very firmly believe at this point, Georgia is not going to be the choice on August 7th. We can dive into that more after the decision is made. But we're 10 days away from what should be, as things stand, commitment day for Nwaneri on Monday, August 7th. It is OU and it is Missouri slugging this thing out. And I think where Oklahoma really has to bring it home with Nwaneri over these final 10 days is, A, come play with all your dudes. Caden Green's here. Kamari Moore is going to be here. Isaiah Mosey, in all likelihood, is going to be here too. Don't be the odd man out. Come play with all your buddies at the University of Oklahoma. And also, I think obviously you approach this delicately as you do any particular method of negative recruiting, if that's what you want to label it. But the Missouri coaching staff and Eli Drinkwitz, they are not on the most secure footing right now. The ice isn't alarmingly thin, but there's also not a lot of margin for error. And if you look at that Missouri schedule in 2023, it's going to be tough for them to win 6 games and be bowl eligible. That is a tough schedule, undeniably. And so for Eli Drinkwitz and that coaching staff, I think one of the things that Oklahoma is probably going to make an effort to get Nwaneri to understand is that, like, if things go a certain way in 2023, that Mizzou staff may not even be there by the time signing day rolls around. Do you really want to take your chances on that? You want to come to a place like Oklahoma where the future is pretty secure and set in stone as far as the vision and the culture and the continuity. So all that to say, long story short, right now, Friday, July 28th at 5:28 p.m., I still like Oklahoma to get Nwaneri's commitment for a vast variety of reasons. But I think the reason I am most confident this is still Oklahoma's race to lose, again, pending the potential of that Missouri visit on Monday. Where I think I'm most confident is the peer-to-peer relationships and the fact that Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates have double-teamed this thing from the get-go and done a heck of a job. And I know we didn't even touch the whole NIL conversation. With a kid like Nwaneri, what you ought to understand is he's going to get paid wherever he goes. And I don't imagine there will be a lot of hemming and hawing over the dollar figure. It's going to be about the situation. It's going to be about the circumstances, and it's going to be about the people. And that's where I maintain that Oklahoma still has the advantage. But we'll know for sure in a week and a half.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. Let's throw this hypothetical out. If that visit to Columbia does take place, is Missouri now the leader? Or does he come back, or does the fact that that visit takes place, then he leaves for vacation? If the visit took place, then he leaves for vacation, wherever that may be, they're supposed to be going on vacation, gets away, and the luster of that kind of wears off, and he's been in communication with his teammates, with Caden Green, with PJ, with Kamari, with Isaiah, and all that. And you keep hearing Oklahoma, 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 Oklahoma. Does that not have a chance to wear off because of the time between that visit and his decision? Whether that's 6 days, 5 days, 7 days, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's sure. I mean, from a certain perspective, yeah, you'd look at that and say it's got a chance to wear off. But I also, last I talked to Will on the record, emphasis on the record. But last time I talked to him on the record about his recruitment was shortly after the Oklahoma official visit in the month of June. And he himself freely acknowledged that, look, at this point, I've been to Oklahoma so many times that there's not really anything new that they can show me. And the same is true of Missouri, if we're being honest with ourselves. He's been to Missouri almost as much, if not as many times as he's been to Oklahoma. He's very familiar with everything that both of those two schools has to offer. And so, and that in itself is another reason why I feel like Oklahoma still maintains the upper hand, is because when you've seen everything that two schools have to offer, and it's so blatantly apparent at a certain point in your recruitment that one school has the upper hand over another, what's changing your mind later on down the line? So, but to kind of loop back around, Nwaneri has enough of a sense of what all Oklahoma entails that I don't feel like a 7-week period without having made it to Oklahoma's campus is going to cause all the love, admiration, whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's going to cause all of that to ebb away to the point where he's going to, have to be reminded of what Oklahoma is and what it offers him. So, yeah, look, you have your healthy concerns if Missouri is able to get him back on campus before the end of the dead period. But even so, if Missouri does get the last visit, that's by no means a surefire indication that he's going to Missouri, because you know who else took their final visit to Missouri before committing? Caden Green. And I'll remind everybody how that recruitment transpired down the stretch. He took that official visit to Missouri. A lot of folks talking up Missouri in the 11th hour of that recruitment. But It was always going to be Oklahoma. And indeed it was. So I don't know that I would feel quite that strongly if Nwaneri were to visit Missouri, but even so, if he were to a week prior to his decision, I still would not take that at face value and say, okay, that right there means that Nwaneri is going to be a Tiger. Have to source it out a little bit more, have to have some conversations, obviously. But at that point, I would not judge a book by its cover in that regard and say, oh, Missouri's the spot because they got the last visit. It runs quite a bit deeper than that.
Right. Okay. So you talk relationships, right? You got Miguel Chavis, Todd Bates. But how much does not only the relationships play in that, but do you think Nwaneri and his family are cognizant of the fact that Drinkwitz is probably not going to be around?
I don't.
Do you think Jamar Mosey has at least quietly been like, dude, I get it, like Missouri a lot, but you may not have the same guy head coaching you throughout your whole tenure. And you're a 3-year guy. Or you're going to be gone in 3 years. The fact that you're not going to have the same guy means there's a good chance that by the time you get there, you're probably starting out fresh with somebody else as it stands today. Have you heard any of that type of talk? Because we know that Georgia tried to, I guess, say some things about Missouri, and that didn't rub the Nwaneris very well, and it cost them. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean,
is that true or not? I don't know, but I mean,
well,
I've heard that from multiple people.
Yeah, look,
and that's not just you, Parker. I've heard it from multiple people.
Well, and I will be willing to go into a lot more detail about this recruitment and all the behind the scenes machinations after the decision is made. But right now, look, it's not Georgia. It's never been Georgia, just like it was never Tennessee.
Are you sure?
It's
Go Vols. Go Dogs.
It's OU Missouri, man. And I honestly, I think Missouri's biggest play here, and everybody's going to think I'm going to say money. It's really not. It's not, because again, this is a kid that's going to get paid a hefty sum wherever he goes.
It's location, logistics.
It's location. Yep. It's location and proximity to home. And if you recall, there are certain people that remember very few details about the PJ Adebawore recruitment because it was so open and shut. Oklahoma offered, he visited Oklahoma, and that was pretty much it. But one thing,
but it really wasn't. He took visits, a bunch of people, and people freaked out about it.
Well, yes, he took visits, but my point is there was never really a doubt that he was going to end up at Oklahoma if you were listening to the right people.
Yeah. Okay. There, you said the right thing right there, because I remember people coming back to our board and being like, well, this person is saying you need to watch out for A&M. This person's saying Missouri. This person's saying Georgia. And we're like, no. Like, yeah, he visited, but no.
Yeah. Well, and people must understand this right here. There is a parallel between the Nwaneri family and the Adebawore family. And it is not just that their kids are edge rushers, right? They're Nigerian. And they are very tight knit. Both those families are very tight knit. And PJ, and I reported this very early on in the process, part of the reason that Oklahoma made so much sense for PJ and why he never really gave the time of day to any other school save for Northwestern after that point, well, and to a certain extent Missouri, but Northwestern because of his brother, naturally. But
sounds so funny right now.
PJ was and I don't believe I ever talked to PJ on the record before his commitment. And so I can say this now. I probably didn't express this at the time because I wanted to be respectful of the fact that, he didn't really want to be quoted on anything at that point. So I'd go up there, we'd talk. Our conversations were off the record, but that's where a lot of my confidence came throughout that recruitment. And one of the reasons why was because PJ was adamant throughout the whole process. Hey, I'm not going to go that far from home. For my family's sake and mine, I'm not going to go that far from home. I'm going to stay within driving distance. And so Oklahoma did a very good job with PJ of being able to sell not only location, but a family environment. And that struck a chord with PJ and his family. And that's why as soon as he visited for the first time in March, it was pretty much over from there. And yeah, he took more visits, but Oklahoma was where his heart was from that point on. And with Nwaneri, yes, Oklahoma kind of fits the bill in that regard too. But so too does Missouri. And Columbia, Missouri, is a lot closer to Lee's Summit than Norman, Oklahoma. And he respects, and I will give the Missouri staff credit here. They have done an outstanding job with that recruitment. And they were early to the table with an offer. And he and his family respect the fact that Missouri was one of the OGs in his recruitment. Before he was ever a 5-star or anything close to it, Missouri identified him as a guy that had P5 talent and a guy that they wanted on their roster. And so they got a jump start over a lot of other schools in the process as far as building relationships there. And when you factor in location and relationships, it really shouldn't be all that shocking that it's OU and Missouri here down the stretch.
So how far along was it that Oklahoma offered? I can't remember. I don't even remember that. Do you?
Missouri.
I remember him being at camp. I remember him being at camp and being so good at that camp last year.
Yeah,
it was him, David Stone. Who else was there? Was it Avian Sims, Colton Yarborough? Who else was there? There's a Alabama's
Edric Hill was there.
Edric Hill, yeah.
PJ was there, but he didn't camp. He was on there. He was there for his official
PJ
visit.
was there, yeah.
But just to shed some light on the timetable to answer your question, Oklahoma didn't offer Williams until June 11th of 2022. Missouri offered Williams on December 5th of 2021. Now, Oklahoma was recruiting Nwaneri for quite a while before they actually offered him. But December 5th, at that point, Brent Venables didn't even have a staff. That was the day after he got hired as Oklahoma's head football coach.
We have another pick in for Missouri, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I saw that.
Nothing. Why? What? Okay, so talk to me. Why nothing? Like don't dive in. Just be as vague as possible. But why nothing here?
Well, just because nothing's happened in the last 2 hours that would change my mind. Now, again, what?
Didn't he put a pick in for Xavier Robinson to Iowa State and then flip it twice?
Perhaps. I don't know.
I can't remember.
I don't know. Point is, I still like Oklahoma here. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the potential of a Missouri visit at the end of the dead period.
Yeah. I guess we need to talk David Stone. He announced that he will be announcing his commitment. He announced his announcement on yesterday. He announced, I was reading some other stuff. He announced his announcement that he will be committing on August 26th. And if you've been on OU Insider's board, I said that over a week ago, that's when that was going to take place. And lo and behold, everybody freaked out because he came out with this story with On3 saying, I'm going to visit Alabama and I'm going to visit Texas A&M in September. But guess what? Alabama's not even in his top 6. And the dude's never visited Alabama much at all, maybe once. So that was kind of a misdirect by Mr. David Stone. I still like Oklahoma for a variety of reasons. And it just feels like at the end of the day, Oklahoma has built up, so many visits with him, the relationship, obviously the NIL. And when you talk about NIL, if you're a kid that wants NIL and wants the attention, you don't go to Michigan State. That's not going to help you get attention in NIL. You're an Oklahoma kid. You don't go to Texas A&M. That's not going to help you get. You're a regular sized fish in a big pond at Texas A&M because there's other 5-star guys around you. Some of them bigger names, some of them more local that are going to have a little bigger punch to pack when it comes to NIL. David Hicks comes to mind there. Trying to think of all the Miami and then Florida, obviously. Yeah, okay. They make sense, but they don't make sense at the same time. There's some people around him that want him at Miami. They want to live in Miami. They want him to go to Miami. But you're talking about a kid that has tried to commit to Oklahoma 3 separate times and had people around him tell him to stop, don't do it, go through the process. And I know, but talking to David, he's kind of tired of this situation a little bit. If I text him, sometimes I have to click notify me because he has everybody on silence. Like, he doesn't want to be bothered. He doesn't want his phone blowing up. He doesn't want a bunch of notifications. He just wants left alone. And so when you get to that point, you can kind of start to see things play out the way we all thought it was going to begin with. And then you add to the fact that a lot of his closest friends are going to Oklahoma. It just makes sense. His sister's at Oklahoma. She's probably going to try to get her master's degree so they can live together at Oklahoma and get that brother-sister bond a little bit more. He said, even on the Know Your Recruit, he said that is something that excites him when it comes to Oklahoma, is getting closer with his sister. They already are close, but getting a lot closer, being able to live together and do those types of things. So there's a lot working in Oklahoma's favor, but Michigan State has done a really good job recruiting him. I don't think anybody will deny that. I think they've done a really good job, extenuating the NIL. I just think that at the end of the day, when you look at Mel Tucker in Michigan State, like, he's on his last leg, much like Eli Drinkowitz at Missouri, on his last leg. And do you choose a school that probably isn't going to have the same head coach as the one you come in with? And maybe not, by the time you get around to it, he may not be a part of that program come National Signing Day. Don't know. So, and with Miami, I just think NIL is going to be really big there. He has some former IMG teammates that are there that are in his ear, but the main IMG guy that everybody needs to look at is Jaden Jackson. Jaden Jackson was recruited to Oklahoma by David Stone. And now David Stone will come publicly and say, he's recruiting me to Oklahoma. But when you look back at it, and history doesn't lie, the facts don't lie, he went and hosted the kid on his visit, or at least help hosting, and was hanging out with him the whole time. So a lot of stuff is really working in Oklahoma's favor now. David Stone is a guy that could pull a shocker out of anybody, and that's just who he is. He kind of marches by the beat of his own drum, no pun intended. But with that personality comes a little edge, and that's why Oklahoma fans are on edge, and I totally get it. I get it. But even with that edge, you still are going to go play at a place that you're comfortable and you feel like you're going to get developed and get to the level that you want to get to. And out of all the people recruiting him, there's no Brandon Jordan anymore. That's gone. Michigan State could lean on that portion of being developed as a defensive pass rusher over everybody at one point. Can't do that anymore. So out of all those people, out of all those programs, Todd Bates has the best track record, and it is not close. It's not close. So I'm going to stick with Oklahoma here. I'm going down to IMG Media Day on August 11th. I'm going to also be at the Bash at the Beach on August 26th. So hopefully, if nothing else, we'll be able to be on top of this for you guys on OU Insider. Because I know Williams, Nwaneri, and David Stone, this could be an epic August for Oklahoma if they pull this out. An epic August. It could be a big pile of crap come August 30th, or it could be a really big month for Oklahoma. I'm going to lean towards a big month, but it's also only July 28th. So, Parker, still thinking Oklahoma for Nwaneri, huh?
Ask me again in 72 hours and no sooner, please.
Dude, I don't like, why would a K-State guy put one in? Like, that's what I don't get.
I plead the fifth.
Just to get ahead, or just to try to cause a stir with the Boganowski stuff?
I plead the fifth.
Oh my gosh, we can say things. Oh, okay. Parker's not gonna bite. All right. I think that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast. We've gone long enough. Brought to you by Olipop. If you're not a member of OUinsider.com right now, it's free. The free ends on July 31st, by the way. So if you're not signed up by July 31st, free till the first game, which means you're going to get all these commitments and stuff, and get all the news on Nwaneri, on Stone, on Boganowski, on Eli Bowen, on Bricks, all these top targets that Oklahoma still has on the board. We're going to talk about all those in the month of August. And if you want to be, up to date and know everything before everybody else, OU Insiders, where it is and where it's at, and you get that for free right now, all the way to September 2nd, with the promo code of P as in party, A as in at, T as in the Palace, or P as in Palace. So PATP23. Promo code PATP23. I almost forgot there for a second. You go to OUinsider.com, you create your screen name, you put that in the promo code as signing up, and you get it for free. You will not be charged until September 2nd, and you'll get all that information for free. So if you go to OUinsider.com, that's how you do it. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Give us 5 stars on all the podcast platforms. It really helps us know if you like the podcast, if you dislike the podcast. It helps us know what to talk about, what not to talk about moving forward. All right. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. That's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider under the Visor Students podcast powered by Olipop. You guys have a blessed day.